Diontae Johnson headed to Carolina. The Chargers released Mike Williams. Tee Higgins has requested a trade. Nearly half the league has a new starting running back. We dig into all of this craziness on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. When I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst over at NFL Network.
I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy betting and free agency. A lot of it this week at sportingnews.com. You can check out my live analysis, grades of all the key moves, as well as winners and losers from the teams who went into free agency. So a lot of good stuff up there and a lot of good stuff we'll talk about here.
Yeah, absolutely. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So like you said, a lot of moves have been made in free agency, but we got big news yesterday evening. Diontae Johnson from the Steelers gets traded to the Panthers. Now, let's start with the Panthers side, all right, with Bryce Young, because we know Bryce Young did not have very many weapons last year. It was Adam Thielen and not a whole lot else, right? Does Diontae Johnson move the needle for you? Will this help Bryce Young, improve in his second season?
Yeah, other than investing a lot of money in two guards, Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis, this was the biggest Panthers move. They also got Josie Jewell at linebacker. So I'm not saying the fan base here is revved up all that much. Diontae Johnson is not Mike Evans. That's what they were hoping for, right, to get him back with Dave Canales, but they kept him in Tampa. Then Michael Pittman was taken off the market. There was some rumblings they would go after Calvin Ridley along with the Patriots and Jaguars, but that didn't happen. So they settled for Diontae Johnson. They give up a disappointing corner, Dante Jackson, who I think could be a lot better in Pittsburgh. So when you look at Diontae Johnson, he is a good route runner, right? He's technically sound. He had the issues with drops a few years ago, but that was atypical. He's not a guy, however, that makes a lot of explosive plays and is not necessarily a consistent red zone threat. Remember, just a season ago in 2022, he couldn't find the end zone. So this is just a interesting move because I don't consider him to be that exciting number one, right? I think he needs some complementary guys with him. Someone to stretch the field. I feel like Adam Thielen was that kind of technical receiver last year, and he had to put up numbers out of nowhere because they didn't have anyone else. He was the old guy that was out there. So I still think they need a field stretcher. They actually have one or had one in DJ Chark, but I think now you got to look to the draft to get that weapon that's going to stretch the field because Diontae Johnson can't do it alone here with Thielen. They need some more help. They got rid of Hayden Hurst at tight end, so they need to find somebody there as well. They could be looking at upgrading that position. They did get a little bit of help there, but when you look at the Panthers, I'm not so high on Diontae Johnson yet. Let's just see how it plays out, especially because we need to see more out of Bryce Young, right? Will these offensive line changes help? Will Dave Canales be the quarterback whisperer again and give him the Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield confidence from the last 2 years? So there's a lot that we have to unpack here. I just don't know what you're going to get from Diontae Johnson. So I think for now, I can't put him above a wide receiver 3, Michelle.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if Adam Thielen gets cut and he gets the targets that Adam Thielen, like they kind of remind me of a lot of each other, especially like an older Adam Thielen, like it's kind of working like a Diontae Johnson with those shorter routes, lower yards per reception. So he can get the volume, and that's exactly what Diontae Johnson is. I was saying I didn't like Diontae Johnson with Russell Wilson, but now that he's going with a team that doesn't really have any weapons, we'll see if Bryce Young can make that improvement from year 1 to year 2. But if Thielen's there also, and then also they have Jonathan Mingo, who they drafted early last year, maybe he takes a leap up. It doesn't really move the needle for me all too much with Bryce Young's development. I will say, though, going to the Steelers side of things, like, who is Russell Wilson going to be throwing to besides George Pickens? Because right now, this is the wide receiver room with the Steelers. It's George Pickens, Dez Fitzpatrick, Calvin Austin, Marquez Callaway, Denzel Mims. I didn't even know he was on the Steelers, honestly. I used to love Denzel Mims coming out of school. Deuce Watts. And like that, I'd never even heard of Deuce Watts. Those are the wide receivers for the Steelers. Yeah. So they're going to have to add people. We'll see maybe if they wait to the draft. There's options out in free agency, not great ones, but Mike Williams just got released. We'll get to that. But George Pickens, is he the type of guy that can get 150 targets? I'm not sure, but he might have to be.
Yeah, you know how I like to draw parallels here. And Arthur Smith is probably going to look at him as Drake London. Now, Drake London flashed a little bit. He could have been a little bit more consistent had they got the passing game going, but he also didn't have the quarterback, right? Arthur Smith in his previous stop at Atlanta to really trust. I mean, now you have a guy who can really throw the ball downfield. So I think you have to consider that. And remember, Arthur Smith, as much as we knocked on him last year, he did pretty well with the guy with the strong arm, mobile Ryan Tannehill for a while, right? Ryan Tannehill was pretty relevant for fantasy in a short window, albeit with the Titans. So there is that kind of consideration. I'm glad it's Wilson and not Tannehill in this situation. So I think George Pickens downfield, that's going to be good. I think this is probably a good move for Pat Freiermuth because, again, he's more of that underneath guy. He can maybe get some touchdowns. We talked about his touchdown value perhaps being bigger with Wilson, who hasn't really had a lot of history thrown to the tight end and having big numbers. So, but it's Arthur Smith's offense. And we know between Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts, the tight end was seen a lot there with targets. So I have to continue to develop, but I think this was a good move. Diontae Johnson has always grumbled about being there. Now they can go and get a young receiver. Calvin Austin, we'll see if he can stay healthy. He's got a lot of speed to burn. They definitely need to add another receiver, but I think they'll do that in the draft. And I think another priority for them will also be adding a left tackle after they got Broderick Jones for the right side last year.
Yeah, and hopefully they move Broderick Jones back to the left. He was good on the left, and then he moved him to the right for no reason. They need a right tackle because Dan Moore is the worst tackle in the league. But I will say this might move up Najee Harris and Jalen Warren a bit for me with Diontae Johnson gone. I didn't realize Broncos running backs led the league in running back targets last year in the NFL. I did not realize that. So Russell Wilson was passing to running backs nonstop. Yeah. Now it was split between the three running backs in the backfield, so none of them really made out. But the Steelers were number 7 in running back targets, and then obviously the Falcons with Arthur Smith was number 5. So we're talking about the Steelers, Arthur Smith now joining them, and now Russell Wilson. They all seem to be targeting the running backs a lot here, and they're going to need the running backs if it's George Pickens and not a whole lot else. So Najee Harris and Jalen Warren could see a nice increase in targets next year. Those are the two that I think get the biggest bump up. I'll say for going back to the Panthers here with Bryce Young, they get Diontae Johnson. Mike Williams was just released. And if you're talking Diontae Johnson and Mike Williams as a duo, that could be pretty interesting. Do you think that they would go after a guy like Mike Williams? Would you like that landing spot for him? I guess it'd be kind of gross for Mike Williams.
Well, I think a couple things you have to consider is Mike Williams a Mike Evans type for Dave Canales, right? He is kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say he's in that territory. He hasn't been as consistent and durable, and no one has been as consistent and durable to start their career as Mike Evans. But Mike Williams, what does he do? He's a big body who can stretch the field and also can get open the red zone, which was a lot like what Mike Evans can do. He's also a Clemson product, so you might be looking to come back to Carolina, right? And maybe continue his career there. So I think he does fit in some ways, but the question is how much is he willing to take to come down, or is he going to look for more of a contending team? Are there some other teams out there? I think you look at the Bears, they could be interested in a player like this as well, right? With now Darnell Mooney officially gone. So there's some options. Maybe the Chiefs steal him from the division rival.
I would love to see him with the Bills. The Bills are great.
Yeah, any of those teams I think would be more appealing for Mike Williams to go to. So Panthers are going to have to make a pretty good offer, I think, for him to land there. And the question is, how much should they spend? But yeah, I think he would kind of fit the philosophy of Canales there for that outside receiver.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good options for him. Like I said, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Jets would be a nice option too, across from Garrett Wilson if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. The Cardinals, they still need a wide receiver. Obviously, I'm hoping they get Marvin Harrison Jr., but they can use 2 wide receivers. That wouldn't kill them. So that would be a nice duo there. And then also Tee Higgins from the Bengals is requesting a trade. I don't actually think he gets traded. I think it's one of those, he just wants the contract and they need to give him one, and they haven't been negotiating with him. So he's trying to get that process moving. But let's say he does get traded. is it just all the same ideal landing spots? The Chiefs, the Bill. I mean, I guess not so much the Bills with Stephon Diggs there, but where would you prefer to see Tee Higgins? What would be his best spot besides the Chiefs? Because that's cheating.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because we're talking about two guys from Clemson that are similar bodies that can do similar things, right? Higgins and Williams. So they're kind of in the same suit here of player. So yeah, I think a lot of those teams we just mentioned, right, would be really good connections with Higgins. Now, I don't think Higgins has a lot of leverage, and I don't think a lot of wide receivers do, especially now we see Calvin Ridley and Hollywood Brown not being signed early because this wide receiver class is so good. And I was joking about Mike Gesicki. It made me laugh a little bit that the Bengals signed him. He's trying to learn the gritty and all this from Jamar Chase, whatever. That's fun. But like Drew Sample, Mike Gesicki tells me they don't necessarily need to go after Brock Bowers, right, in the first round anymore. They probably look for offensive line help. But if they're not happy with what Tee Higgins is asking for, the deal, they can just get a rookie here. It's probably a better move for them, to be honest with you, because they got to pay Jamar Chase. You cannot pay two wide receivers in this league. I mean, they could get away with one more season anyway with Higgins on the franchise tag, which is probably the Bengals' goal here. But really, if he asks for too much and wants a long-term deal, they're not going to give it to him. They got to pay Jamar Chase ahead of him. They're too smart to do that. So I think, watch out. Higgins still could be traded into one of those teams, but because it's a Bengals, Michelle, I don't see him going to the Chiefs or Bills to help one of those teams in the contention here in the AFC.
Yeah, again, Cardinals would be a really nice spot. You trade your 27th overall pick you got from Houston, send it over to the Bengals for Tee Higgins, still take Marvin Harrison Jr., and then all of a sudden your offense with Kyler Murray is looking real nice.
Yeah, I do like that for sure. And it'll be fun to see where he ends up. But in our next segment, we'll talk about, it's been a lot here going on. We'll talk about our favorite moves so far for fantasy in free agency. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is sponsored and brought to you by BetterHelp. And look, a lot of the times we think about, can we have more time, right? And that's something that we all deal with. What would you do with an extra hour in your day? What would time be like if it was unlimited? How would we use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing in your schedule is know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find out what matters to you so you can do more of it on your own time and really focus on you. And the best way to really focus in on that is with therapy. And look, if you've been worried about doing this in person, well, BetterHelp is here for you because online therapy can be really therapeutic. It's going to be entirely online for you, and you don't need to maybe put yourself out there in person, but BetterHelp can take care of you there with a really great therapist. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with the licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So you can get the right fit for you where you're working online with someone that you can trust and feel great about getting you on the right path with your life. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/lockedon. All right, before we continue the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football, I'm talking free agency here in the NFL. It is a big time in MLB. Don't forget, here on the Locked On Network, we've launched the first ever National Sports 24/7 streaming channel. And baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Check it out, 7 p.m. Eastern on March 20th. Now, before that begins and the first pitch is there, we got to look at the first strikes here that have happened in free agency. So, Michelle, so far, we've had a lot of moves. We talked about all the running backs and all the movement. What's your favorite so far that you like for fantasy for that individual?
Yeah, it's one that came out of nowhere, and it's Josh Jacobs to the Packers. That would have been the very last place I thought that Josh Jacobs was going to land up at, but I absolutely love it now that they release Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is with the Vikings, but Josh Jacobs now has his backfield all to himself because even A.J. Dillon is out of town. He's looking to sign with a new team this offseason, but Jacobs is still super young. He just turned 26 years old in February. So brand new 26-year-old has a ton of he has a lot still left in the tank, right? And it feels like Jacobs has just been like, having a solid career, but not an insane career. But at the same time, last year was his career low with 1,100 yards in 13 games. He was well on his way to having his 5th straight season with 1,200 plus scrimmage yards. So like he's been getting it done. His touchdowns have been inconsistent, but he should have this entire backfield to himself in an offense that's it looked really like it was up and coming last year. It started slowly, but with those youngins, they started to really start to click with each other. So I expect this offense to take the next step forward. And with Josh Jacobs being there, like he should get the targets, he should get all the goal line carries. He's going to get over probably 250 carries next year. I love this landing spot for Josh Jacobs. I've never been super high on him for fantasy, but I think I'm going to be this year.
Yeah, I mean, just 2 years ago, he was awesome. And look, we know the history of running backs who get really high volume the next year. And if they try to do it again, they're going to wear down a little bit. But maybe it's taking some time off, being on a new team will rejuvenate him here from this off season. You'll be leaned on a lot here, right, to help Jordan Love, and really can be a check down option for him all over the field. He's going to get all the touchdown opportunities because he's the main guy here, right? There's no Dillon, there's no Jones, so it's all him right now, and that's what you like for any of these backs in their destination. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. This is the best kind of individual move, the best upgrade for a player from where they were going in free agency, because again, some of the other moves at running back, not sure that they're an upgrade, right? I think you'll get some of the numbers that you had, but I think this one, you're just excited about the upside for a still, as you mentioned, young player. Now, my choice is Kirk Cousins. Again, I was high on him, but what I like about Kirk Cousins, Michelle, it's not just about Kirk putting up the numbers here. Now, I don't think they would have paid him this much if they weren't confident that he can come back from his torn Achilles. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers was out there on the field practicing, you're going to have a long time for Kirk Cousins to recover and be ready to go for September of the season here in 2025 or 2024, I should say. But you look at Kirk Cousins, he still has plenty left. He's going to be 36. He was playing at a really high level the past 2 seasons. And what did he do it in? A Rams-style offense with Kevin O'Connell. He gets Zach Robinson, the latest Sean McVay assistant, to spread his wings elsewhere. So I like the Falcons. Look at the weapons here. I mean, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and underrated Darnell Mooney. I'm going to keep saying underrated Darnell Mooney. This is a great array of weapons. And look, it's not Justin Jefferson on the outside, right? Drake London is not there, but Kyle Pitts is athletic upside tight end the way that TJ Hawkinson does. Darnell Mooney could be really more effective and be in the Jordan Addison role here. And they didn't have a back at this caliber, right? I mean, you had Alexander Madison doing some in the passing game, but keep in mind, Bijan Robinson can get him like 4 or 5 touchdowns just catching the ball. So I do like Kirk Cousins quite a bit here. There's not going to be a competition. They're not going to bring in a rookie. It's all him. Good offensive line with Jake Matthews and some other players there. I love the front here for him. So he's going to be well protected, pocket passer, throw the ball downfield. I think it's an exceptional fit. And the best thing is he doesn't have to learn the offense. Plug and play, use these guys in, and I love it. I think it's going to be a great transition. Bump him up, bump all the weapons up here as well in Atlanta.
Yeah, I would say my favorite landing spot for Kirk Cousins would have been to stay with Minnesota and the Vikings. But if you had to go somewhere, the Falcons, you couldn't pick a better spot with the weapons that they have. They're also in a dome, right? Another dome team. We know Kirk Cousins is much better in a dome. And also now he doesn't have to travel to Chicago and Green Bay. Like he has a much easier division. And then also, another dome with the Saints, nice weather with the Buccaneers. I guess the Panthers would be the only thing that maybe on the line there. It might be chilly, but like much easier division for him with much better weapons. So it all depends on this Achilles. We don't really have enough information on Achilles injuries, especially at the quarterback position, but he never got his fantasy points off of his mobility. Like that's never been a thing for Kirk Cousins. So that's why I'm not worried. It's not like, oh, we need these rushing yards for Kirk Cousins to be good, or he scrambles all the time to make his big plays. That doesn't happen. He's a pocket passer. He stays in the pocket. So I don't think the Achilles injury should bother him too much.
Yeah, and I've seen the quarterback documentary on Netflix. This guy's going to dunk himself in a tank. He's going to lift weights all offseason long. He's going to be ready, and he's going to be pumped up for his new team. And he makes a lot of money, but I was really more respectful of what he does, because I watched that show, and I had a new total feeling for Kirk Cousins. Like, I didn't think of him as a real top quarterback, but you put him in a show with Patrick Mahomes, you're going to start to think that a little bit. But I look at him and he's played his best football. There's no doubt about it in Minnesota here late in his career. I think he has plenty left. His arm was extremely strong. So I think he's a dedicated guy that's going to give it all for another team here. So really, he's made a lot of money, but I think he's shown these teams he's worth it. I mean, the end of the Commanders' career was good. The Vikings, he was very good, put up his career numbers. So if he gets his money, he's going to go out there and earn it. So that's what I like. And he's also going to be rather durable. I know he had the Achilles last year, but for the most part, I think he'll be out on the field just kind of a fluke thing that happened here last year. So I think in general, Cousins a guy you can trust, drop back. It was kind of like Matthew Stafford was with the Lions. The winning wasn't there, but the numbers were always there when we look at fantasy. And I think when you have a big arm, Michelle, it's going to keep you relevant in fantasy for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you love the Kirk Cousins landing spot. I love Josh Jacobs. We're going to tell you why I hate the Austin Eckler to the Commanders and you don't like the DeAndre Swift to the Bears. We'll get into the reasons why in our final segment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite event should not be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I personally have used the Game Time app so many times in my life, so much when I lived in Pittsburgh, right near the Steelers Stadium. And then also in Houston last summer, my sister was in town. We were at brunch downtown Houston. We saw that the Astros were playing because all the fans were wearing their jerseys. Literally just went on the app and bought Astros tickets in about 0.5 seconds and then walked over to the stadium. Love using this service. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Vinny, I almost picked DeAndre Swift to the Bears as my least favorite landing spot, but then I changed my mind and went with Austin Eckler. But let's have you explain your Swift to the Bears first. I'm on the fence. About it. I can't decide if I like it or not. Tell me why I should not like it.
Right. I'm glad you're right there with me with DeAndre Swift. And I feel like this happened right last year, and I made a big mistake on Miles Sanders. He was like one of the first guys signed. If you remember, The Panthers jumped on Miles Sanders, and that didn't work out, did it? No. It was terrible last year to watch Miles Sanders. And look, the opportunity was there, but he didn't take it. I mean, Chuba Hubbard took it. This is a very similar situation. DeAndre Swift was one of the first moves made in all of free agency. And I was like, really? The Bears could have gone after any of these other guys and they want DeAndre Swift? I mean, the Eagles were looking for an upgrade. I mean, if the Eagles really liked him, keep in mind, DeAndre Swift is a Philadelphia native. If they really liked him and what he did last year, they would have jumped on him. I mean, they were looking for a running back too, right? They went after Saquon Barkley. And then, Josh Jacobs fall in line with the Packers, and all these things started happening after this. And you were like, why did they settle for DeAndre Swift? Well, that's the question I still am wondering here, because I thought their backs weren't too bad. They just didn't give the opportunity. One guy last year was like, okay, Dante Foreman's healthy. We're going to give him the ball. Oh, no, Khalil Herbert is in here. Okay, we're going to give it to him. Oh, wait, we like Roschon Johnson. We're going to give it to him. They just split this workload between 3 guys from game to game. Somebody was healthy. Somebody was hurt in each game. And it wasn't all that exciting in the end when you add it all up because of the 3-headed monster. Now, this could happen again, right? I mean, Herbert is good. I think Johnson is good. Swift is a guy not known for his durability. I mean, he played his most action last year, but the Eagles were calculated with his workload. When he was with the Lions and getting him involved there, I mean, he was a pass catcher. That was his biggest role here. So I don't know if he's going to hold up as an quote every down back here. I don't think that's the role that he's meant to play overall. So I know he got to 1,000 yards last year, but that was the Eagles. That was a running game where most people that you plug in there off the street are going to have 1,000 yards because of how good their offensive line is. The Bears got to work on their line. I mean, it's pretty good run blocking, but you don't know if Justin Fields is going to be there. If you don't have the running quarterback, do teams key on him? Caleb Williams? I mean, there are all kinds of factors that could work against DeAndre Swift here, from usage to the talent around him. So that's why I'm off DeAndre Swift. I've never been a big Swift guy. I think with the Lions, that's why they upgraded, right? Because he couldn't stay on the field. He was limited as a runner. He's not necessarily the red zone guy. So I think the same stuff is going to follow him on his third team.
Yeah, it's so hard with this one because do they just go with Swift? And like you said, is he that type of back though that can even handle that workload? I don't know. Or do they try to get Roschon Johnson involved again? Do they keep Khalil Herbert and make this a three-headed monster? And we don't know what this quarterback situation is going to be like. Even if I know Caleb Williams is supposed to be this great quarterback, and even if they take him, we don't know. We don't know anything about Caleb Williams, right? And it can be hard with a rookie quarterback. So, yeah, I don't love the landing spot for him. And it was weird that it was like the first signing right away. I mean, it was like immediately after the legal tampering window opened, they were like dying to go get them some Swift. It's an interesting landing spot. I'll say the one I like even worse, though, is Austin Eckler to the Commanders, because it seems like everyone how many veteran running backs have now changed teams this offseason? All of them, besides Austin Eckler, landed in a spot where it's just them, right? And a bunch of no names. So it's like, okay, they should get a ton of volume. With Austin Eckler, though, the Commanders, there's Brian Robinson Jr. there. And no, he's not like this top tier running back, but he's a solid back that's going to get work. Like I don't think with Austin Eckler here, they're just going to say bye to Brian Robinson Jr. I still think Brian Robinson Jr. will be that main back in carries. So then you're talking about Austin Eckler has got so much of his production on targets and on touchdowns. Well, Brian Robinson Jr. is like double the size of Austin Eckler. So I think he would still be the goal line back whenever they do get scores. We'll see if the Commanders' offense can be better this year. And then with targets, it seems like the odds have increased way up for Jaden Daniels to be the number 2 pick in the draft. Well, the Commanders own the number 2 pick in the draft right now. Jaden Daniels is a mobile guy, so that takes even more rushing opportunities away. Also, typically mobile quarterbacks don't pass to running backs all that often. And that showed in LSU, right? Last year at LSU, the top running back in targets had 14 receptions all season long with Jaden Daniels. So if he's not getting targets, and that's just assuming it's Jaden Daniels, maybe it's Drake May, and he's probably not going to get the goal line work and not a ton of carries. And he's just turned 29 years old, or actually he turns 29 in a couple months. We saw the production drop off last year in efficiency, got the tiniest of contracts at 2-year, $8.4 million for what Austin Eckler has done. That's tiny. I hate all of this together.
Yeah, he did get a lot of money, but I think part of it is aging, and I think you could see him slow down a little bit last year. And that's probably what he had to accept on the market. And he might have just liked to fit with Cliff Kingsbury. And that's an interesting parallel. Like I've drawn this with personnel in the past for these offensive coordinators. You go back to James Conner and Chase Edmonds, right? That's probably your best case scenario. And then Conner broke out of that. And I think Brian Robinson Jr. would represent Conner, the bigger back here that you would use and could rack up the touchdowns in the red zone, where like Chase Edmonds at that point was just a flex play at some point, right? Because you saw his receptions and PPR. Like, I don't think there's much value for Austin Eckler in standard leagues at all. At half point, a little bit more, and full PPR might be his only value here. And I think, as I mentioned, this is a better reality move. The same thing with Zach Ertz in this mix, where they have a couple veterans who can catch passes, take pressure off the receivers, Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. We'll see. They also had to replace Curtis Samuel on top of Antonio Gibson. Gibson went to the Patriots. Samuel is still a free agent here. So he's kind of in that role, right? The short area type person. So he's going to be reception and touchdown dependent a lot here, even more so than he was with the Chargers. So it's tough. Again, I like this move in reality because it diversifies the passing game, but that also hurts Austin Eckler, right? You have a lot of different targets. There's a chance they could bring back Samuel, or they should target another receiver. And I think Ertz is going to be more involved than we think right away. I mean, they moved on from Logan Thomas and went to Ertz very quickly here. So there's a lot of things to consider and unpack here with the Commanders. I'm not sure either which quarterback they're going for. This is really hard to know between May and Daniels. They've been really good about hiding this. So a lot of variables here. And really that came down to our two picks here, that Swift and Eckler have a lot of variables. Jacobs and Cousins don't have a lot of variables. And that's why we like those moves a lot better in fantasy.
Yeah, it's really interesting how low of a contract that Austin Eckler got for what he's done in like just recent years, and the other teams, like the Cowboys, didn't want to go get him. I feel like that's saying a lot. The Cowboys have a wide open spot. I think he would have been a really nice fit there. I would have been high on him then, and they're like, no, we don't want to pay him 2 years for $8.4 million. So, or maybe they did, and he just chose the Commanders. Very highly doubt that, but. Yeah, all of it together. Not excited about him, which is sad. I loved Austin Eckler in fantasy during his time where he was at his prime, but I think his run is over now, unfortunately, being that top elite athlete or fantasy asset. That is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more news and free agency. Maybe we'll get some trades. Who knows? You won't want to miss it. Bye, y'all.